Those things sort of give you the experience and the mental fortitude to be able to handle something like this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you obviously playing in LA is, and then alongside LeBron, you can't really get any bigger than that, right? And then just playing in the Olympics. I think the Olympics this year, when I was playing with all those wonderful guys, Hall of Famers, on the biggest stage, the entire world is watching. I think those moments, playing in the finals, those moments help me prepare for something like this, because you're going to have adversity in the game, and you have to be tough, mentally tough. And I think, having those experiences, having those moments, coming into this situation. And then I also just realized, like, it's basketball at the end of the day. Like, this is what you do. You've been doing this since you were 3 years old. Like, go out there and be yourself and have fun, getting back to my natural position. And like I said, the team, really just allowed me to be myself.
The NBA world just witnessed one of the most shocking trades in recent memory. Anthony Davis is officially heading to and this move has sent absolute shockwaves throughout the entire league. This wasn't just some random trade that happened out of nowhere. This was a carefully orchestrated deal that involved multiple teams, injured superstars, and some of the biggest names in basketball. The dominoes started falling after Jimmy Butler went down with a devastating season-ending ACL injury, and suddenly, everything changed. That injury opened the door for Dallas to finally make the salary numbers work, and before anyone could process what was happening, Butler was being rerouted to the Mavericks as the centerpiece of this massive multi-team deal. Everyone across the basketball world is asking the exact same question right now, and they're asking it loud and clear. Can Anthony Davis actually stay healthy long enough to help protect Steph Curry's final championship push? That's the billion-dollar question that nobody can answer with certainty. This trade didn't just materialize out of thin air, not even close. The Dallas Mavericks spent weeks finalizing a complex deal that sends Anthony Davis to Golden State, while Jimmy Butler gets rerouted through Chicago as part of this complicated high-stakes shuffle. Front offices were scrambling around the clock, phones were buzzing nonstop, and suddenly, a deal that felt completely impossible just days earlier became very real and very official. This move officially closes the chapter on a Dallas experiment that never truly found its rhythm or identity. The Mavericks had big dreams when they first acquired Davis, but those dreams never quite materialized the way everyone hoped they would. Now here's where things get really interesting. It may not have been the Warriors who initially wanted to make this trade happen. Instead, it was actually the Dallas Mavericks who were the driving force behind these discussions. However, Golden State was reportedly reluctant to give up a certain key player to make this deal work. We're talking about Draymond Green here. Multiple reports confirmed that it was the Mavs who called Golden State about potentially trading for Anthony Davis, and they specifically wanted Draymond Green included in the package. It wasn't the other way around like some people initially thought. Let's take a step back and rewind this entire situation for a second so we can understand how we got here. The Mavericks originally landed Anthony Davis from the Los Angeles Lakers on February 5, 2025, in what was supposed to be a franchise-altering blockbuster swap that involved. On paper, this looked absolutely unstoppable. Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and rookie sensation Cooper Flagg was supposed to be a nightmare matchup for every single team in the league. The basketball world thought Dallas had just created the next super team. Instead, reality hit them hard and fast. Dallas struggled to find consistency and hovered around a .500 record for most of the season. Chemistry never fully clicked between the star players, and injuries kept yanking away any momentum just as things started to build and improve. The pressure was mounting with each passing game. The contract situation only added even more pressure to an already tense situation. Davis came to Dallas with a massive $54.1 million salary this season, locked into a 5-year, $189.9 million deal that was loaded with player options stretching all the way into 2027 and 2028. That kind of money doesn't just sit quietly on a roster without causing complications. It complicates potential trades, forces tough decisions from the front office, and turns every single missed game into a major talking point for fans and media members alike. Teams around the league had to carefully dance around the NBA's collective bargaining rules just to make any potential deal legal under the current salary cap structure. Meanwhile, Golden State saw an opening they simply couldn't ignore any longer.
The Warriors have been absolutely desperate for a dominant interior presence to complement Stephen Curry's elite shooting and veteran leadership. Reports from multiple insiders say that Dallas was actually the team who picked up the phone first, quietly floating Anthony Davis as a potential solution to Golden State's biggest weakness down low. From there, things moved incredibly fast, and suddenly the Warriors went all in on one last bold swing to capture another championship before their window completely closes. Now the pressure is sky high for everyone involved in this trade. This isn't really about talent, because everyone in the basketball world knows that Davis can absolutely dominate when he's actually on the floor and healthy. This is about timing, durability, and whether Golden State just bought themselves another legitimate banner chance or just signed up for another expensive gamble that could blow up in their faces. At first, Golden State wasn't particularly eager to crack open its core roster, not even close to eager. The Warriors made it crystal clear early on in trade discussions that they didn't want to move key veterans like Jimmy Butler or Draymond Green, especially with the season already hanging by a thread and their playoff positioning uncertain. The front office knew that once those big names hit the negotiating table, there would be absolutely no going back. Jimmy Butler's contract alone made things incredibly tricky to navigate. He was carrying a massive $54.1 million salary, which was nearly identical to Anthony Davis's contract, and he had just arrived in Golden State after that major 2025 trade from Miami. The Warriors were counting on Butler to be a key piece of their championship puzzle. Then, everything changed on January 19, 2026, and it changed in the worst possible way. Butler went down with a torn right ACL during a matchup against his former team, the Miami Heat. It was a brutal blow that instantly flipped the Warriors' entire plans completely upside down. Shortly after the injury occurred, the team confirmed the devastating news that Butler would miss the rest of the entire 2025-26 season. Suddenly, his massive contract became a trade tool instead of a championship piece. The Warriors had to completely rethink their entire strategy moving forward. Meanwhile, Anthony Davis wasn't exactly in perfect shape either during all of this. On January 8, 2026, he suffered ligament damage in his left hand, an injury that was expected to sideline him for at least 6 weeks, according to medical reports. That setback cooled trade interest around the league pretty fast. Front offices around the NBA paused their negotiations, rewatched game tape carefully, and started asking some really hard questions about durability, availability, and long-term risk factors. Davis's talent level was never the issue for any team. It was always about how often he could actually be on the floor and contributing at a high level without getting hurt again. Even prominent analysts could see the tension building in Dallas throughout the season. Charles Barkley hinted that something was clearly off during a Christmas Day broadcast, specifically pointing out that Dallas just didn't look settled or comfortable as a team. At several points throughout this season, the Mavericks were sitting at 12 wins and 20 losses, just spinning their wheels while waiting for answers that never seemed to come. Rookie Cooper Flagg was absolutely doing his part and putting up strong numbers while showing tremendous promise for the future, but the roster around him felt completely stuck in limbo. Everyone around the league knew something major had to give eventually.
Behind the scenes, pressure was rising incredibly fast. Rich Paul of Clutch Sports reportedly began pushing hard for movement, aiming to place Davis in a better position where he could secure a massive contract extension in August 2026. We're talking about a potential deal worth 4 years and $275 million. That's generational wealth we're discussing here. Dallas wasn't ready to commit to that level financially. The Mavericks front office hesitated significantly, citing Davis's age and the very limited number of games he had actually played this season due to various injuries. That hesitation sent an extremely loud message throughout the league, and it definitely didn't go unnoticed by other teams or by Davis's representation. When Jimmy Butler tore his ACL, a lot of Mavericks fans immediately had their antennas go up because they realized something important. Anthony Davis and Jimmy Butler make almost the exact same amount of money in salary. The Warriors have a pretty old team overall, and everyone knows they desperately want to make one more serious championship run for Steph Curry before his career winds down. You would presume that some desperation might set in, and maybe the Mavs could score a future draft pick or two along with Butler in exchange for Davis. Some analysts openly wondered if the Mavericks might be in trouble now because it's becoming increasingly clear that Anthony Davis, as much as people like him and respect him as a player, might never be consistently healthy for a full season. Some executives privately admitted they might consider moving on from Davis if they were running the team. The thinking was simple. Maybe it's Cooper Flagg's team now, and it's time to build around the young rookie instead of the injury-prone veteran. This entire situation made people wonder if something was also being engineered behind the scenes by Clutch Sports. That agency is well known for moving chess pieces behind the scenes and trying to get their clients into the most advantageous situations possible. The reality of the trade market was harsh, though. When Anthony Davis is sidelined indefinitely with an injury, it becomes much harder to actually trade him because teams get nervous about medical risks. Insiders reported that right after the injury, there didn't appear to be anything actively percolating in trade talks, but they also weren't going to say it was completely over when there were still 2 weeks and change left before the trade deadline. This is where the chessboard got extremely crowded, with multiple teams involved. Insider Mark Stein revealed some fascinating information that Chicago had quietly stepped into the mix as a facilitator team. By late January 2026, the Bulls were sitting just 2 games out of a top 6 playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, and they were actively looking to make a smart push toward the postseason. Chicago had the right contracts, the necessary flexibility, and the motivation to help route money and assets between Dallas and Golden State to make the math work under the salary cap. There was also a significant personal angle to consider here. Anthony Davis has extremely deep Chicago roots after growing up in the city and attending Perspective's charter school there. The Bulls were actively searching for front-court upgrades to support their young pieces like Josh Giddey and Modest Buzelis for the future. Hypothetical trade frameworks started floating around league circles, with Chicago potentially sending protected first-round draft picks to Dallas while absorbing certain contracts to balance the financial books. The result would be a pathway that lets Golden State land Anthony Davis without completely gutting their core roster, Dallas collects valuable assets for the future, and Chicago quietly upgrades its long-term outlook. On paper, it's actually pretty clever from a front office perspective, but the real verdict will ultimately come on the court when these players actually suit up and play together.
NBA insider Mark Stein made it very clear early on that while Anthony Davis being available was always floating around as a possibility, Chicago's front office never showed any concrete urgency to act on the swirling rumors. Under general manager Arturas Karnisovas, the Bulls stayed remarkably quiet, cautious, and completely non-committal as speculation continued to swirl around the league. But as the trade deadline crept closer and closer with each passing day, pressure started stacking up incredibly fast for all parties involved. Jimmy Butler's devastating injury changed the entire landscape literally overnight. The money suddenly lined up perfectly, the timing tightened considerably, and Golden State finally decided it was time to pull the trigger on a blockbuster move. The injury that flipped everything upside down happened on January 19, 2026, and it hit extremely hard for Warriors fans. Jimmy Butler went down during what should have been a routine 135-112 win over his former team, the Miami Heat. Midway through the third quarter of that game, Butler landed awkwardly while reaching for a pass and immediately knew something was seriously wrong with his knee. There was no contact with another player, no collision whatsoever, just the absolute worst kind of moment that every professional athlete fears deep down. The Warriors confirmed the heartbreaking news the very next day through an official statement. Butler had suffered a torn ACL and would miss the complete remainder of the 2025-26 season without any possibility of return. Surgery was scheduled immediately, recovery timelines were uncertain at best, and suddenly the franchise was staring directly at a brutal crossroads that would define their future. At 36 years old, Butler's road back to the court wasn't just about physical healing, it was about time, career mileage, and harsh reality. The concerns about his knee weren't new either for people who had followed his career closely. A meniscus tear way back in 2018 and an MCL sprain in 2024 had already raised some red flags long before this most recent injury occurred. The accumulation of injuries mattered significantly to medical experts. No rehab plan in the world, no matter how advanced or well-funded, can fully erase years and years of wear and tear on the same joint, and league insiders absolutely knew this fact. Warriors general manager Mike Dunleavy Jr. addressed the difficult situation publicly on January 20, 2026, striking a very careful balance in his comments. He voiced optimism about Butler's potential rehab process while openly acknowledging just how challenging ACL recoveries can realistically be for players, especially older veterans. Publicly, the team stood firmly behind Butler, stressing their full support and patience throughout his recovery. Privately, though, the timing of this injury couldn't have been more ironic or unfortunate. Before the injury happened, Butler had been a real difference-maker and impact player for Golden State. With him healthy and in the lineup, the Warriors posted an impressive record hovering around 46 wins and 22 losses. His elite defense, mental toughness, and reliable secondary scoring fit absolutely perfectly next to Stephen Curry's game. This wasn't just some rental player they had acquired, this was supposed to be a core piece doing exactly what he was brought in to accomplish. Looking at the statistics, Butler had delivered exactly what was expected of him when healthy. In 38 starts during the 2025-26 season before his injury, he averaged a solid 20 points per game, along with 5.6 rebounds, 4.9 assists, and 1. Up to 40% of professional athletes report experiencing fear of re-injury, even after officially returning to competition, and this fear affects their aggression levels and decision-making abilities on the court. For Jimmy Butler, whose entire identity and reputation is built on confidence and playoff toughness, that mental hurdle mattered just as much as the physical rehabilitation itself. The rehab process itself can be incredibly isolating for injured players. NBA return-to-play rates after ACL injuries typically sit somewhere around 85 to 90% overall, but only about 65 to 70% of players fully regain their absolute peak performance level.
Those numbers dip even further for players over 30 years old, and Butler wasn't just over 30, he was deep into veteran territory at age 36. History offered some mixed lessons to consider. Derrick Rose's multiple knee issues shortened his prime years dramatically and changed his entire career trajectory. Klay Thompson eventually returned strong after dealing with both ACL and Achilles injuries, but only after making major role adjustments to his game. At 36 years old, Butler faced a very real possibility that a lengthy recovery could quietly accelerate retirement conversations within just a few seasons. Despite all of these concerning factors, Golden State publicly insisted they weren't actively shopping Butler around to other teams. General Manager Dunleavy stated clearly that he envisioned Butler returning next season and helping the team compete again, similar to his early impact before the injury. The franchise directly reassured Butler that he remained an important part of their long-term plan moving forward. Still, harsh reality slowly crept in through the cracks. Butler's $54.1 million salary suddenly became impossible to ignore in trade discussions. Under current NBA salary cap rules, contracts that large don't just represent individual players anymore. They represent significant leverage in blockbuster trade talks. Whether the Warriors actually wanted to admit it publicly or not, Butler's massive deal was a perfect matching tool in any potential blockbuster trade scenarios. There was genuine emotion involved in this decision too, which made it even harder. Dunleavy and Butler were former teammates who played together earlier in their careers, sharing real history that went well beyond a standard general manager and player relationship. Moving an injured veteran just days after such a devastating setback carried significant emotional weight that absolutely no spreadsheet or financial analysis could properly measure. The Warriors organization faced an absolutely brutal choice that no franchise wants to make. They could commit fully to Butler's extensive rehab process and risk potentially wasting the remaining prime years of Steph Curry's Hall of Fame career, or they could use Butler's contract while it still held real value on the trade market to acquire another star. Butler had definitely earned organizational trust through his on-court performance when healthy. In games that Butler actually played, Golden State posted an impressive 50 wins and 29 losses, including a very strong 25-19